Third bad policy decision, socialism. Socialism kills. Now, uh, this is such, I mean, we could do like 15 podcasts on the effects of socialism killing. Now, I think there's enough Russia, the USSR, China, Vietnam to show you how badly, Venezuela, to show you how things kill. But in this one, I wanted to reverse that policy making slightly and focus on the four countries that are given to you as an example of socialism success. The Nordic model: Norway, Denmark, Sweden, Finland. Okay, now everybody is like, when you show them Hugo Chavez, they'll be like, oh, but look at Sweden. When you show them Mao Zedong, they'll be like, oh, look at Finland. When you show them the failures of Stalinism, they'll say, oh, but look at Norway. Things like this. So what happens is, I want you to, there are lots of books on the economic histories of these four countries, which you'd really need to read, where, unfortunately, because of the current, there was one particular book, it was very strange. I forget the author now, but it was the economic history of Norway, I think. No, what was it? Of Sweden. And amazingly, the online edition, I remember reading the same author when I was a kid. And I downloaded the online edition sometime back from LibGen. And what ended up happening was, I was looking for the same paragraphs that all been removed. They'd all been removed because these days criticizing socialism is a bad thing. So they're actually censoring books out. Now, what you need to understand is that these countries, Norway was dirt poor. Okay, through most of the 1800s, Norway and Denmark were dirt poor. Sweden was actually quite rich, but it chose a kind of public spending path quite early on. By the 1860s, 1870s, they were in public spending. They got into serious debt. On the eve of World War I, they were on the point of a fiscal collapse. And at this time, socialism hadn't really taken off, but it was still quite socialistic, without saying socialism. And what came and saved them? Guess. Guess, Kushal?
Well, don't they have the lowest corporate tax rates in the world?
No. What saved them in 1914?
War or क्या होएगा?
World War One. Right.
Yeah,
World
war
War
होएगा,
One.
manufacturing होएगी और economy boom होएगी.
Not even manufacturing. They were able to sell weapons to both sides and basically use war profits, what's called price gouging.
Yeah.
To rescue themselves from the war. But then after the First World War, you actually have full scale, as in named socialism set in.
Mm-hmm.
Before, it was socialism in all but name. After World War One, because there was such a huge, they made such bumper profits. And like idiots, they decide to spend it all.
Oh, those evil capitalists.
No, evil socialists, technically. And then, on the eve of the Second World War, they're in the midst of another economic crisis, on the midst of another collapse. And guess what happens? World War II!
War.
Yay! And then, on the eve of World War II, this time their bumper profits, they actually made 3 to 4 times the amount of money, because by this time they actually had industrial goods and things like that to sell. Before, it used to be coal and things like that they had to sell. This time it was actual finished products. So the L-40 gun, the Bofor's L-40 gun, for example, the shoulder-fired bazookas and things like that, these were all the things that they sold to both sides, both to the Allies and to the Axis powers, and they again made a bumper profit, which saved them. Now, thankfully, remember, socialism is much more disastrous when it's duplicated over a large scale than it is over a small scale. If you look at Sweden's population today, it is less than the population of South Delhi. Mm-hmm. Okay, so it's very easy, and mind you, in spite of easy in small scale, they averted 2 major economic collapses through war. Now, They've learned some kind of fiscal responsibility, yes, but the one part of Swedish society, and in fact, most of Nordic society, that they won't tell you is it has one of the highest outward migration rates per capita. Scandinavians migrate in droves to America, Australia, and the rest of the Anglophone because they just don't want that tax burden to be happening. Okay. So you still go there. You will think that Nordic migration in percentage terms would almost be as bad as some kind of a refugee country trying to get out.
Hmm.
Anybody who's even halfway really talented who stands out. If you're run of the mill normal, you'll be perfectly fine because there's no reward for overperformance. But there's no punishment for underperformance. So if you're a lower to okay kind of worker, you're perfectly fine in Sweden, Norway, Finland, Denmark. But if you're ambitious, you want to shine, etc., you get the hell out of there. Okay. And this is why people keep talking about IKEA. What they won't tell you is the idea might have been Swedish, but all the production used to happen in Poland.
Hmm.
And even now, a lot of the production happens offshore. But they don't want Swedish. It's marketed as a Swedish company, though it's still marketed as a Swedish company. Uh, but it isn't. Well, I mean, it is. You also look at new entrepreneurs, it's the lowest. To this day in Sweden, the Wallenbergs own everything. Okay, Saab, Volvo, well, not Volvo anymore. Volvo is now Chinese, but Saab, the shipbuilding part, Kockums, which then became a part of Saab, etc. It's all owned by one family called the Wallenbergs. Okay, so you have that
Hmm.
concentration into old wealth, and socialism serves as the perfect way of defoiling it. So this is Sweden. Next is Norway. Norway was so dirt poor that when they asked for their independence, the Swedes said, please take your independence and get lost. They didn't even try to hold on to Norway because they considered them semi civilized barbarians, uneducated people, hill folk, forest folk, whatever. And what saved Norway? Norway was a dirt poor country. When does Norway become rich? Any idea?
I think Norway would start maybe in the 60s and 70s, right?
Mhm. Yeah. Why?
I honestly don't know why. It must be some conflict again, because most of these nations are conflict profiteers.
Oil, North Sea
Yeah.
oil,
Yeah,
right?
well, I'm in
Huh.
conflict again.
Yeah. So it was North Sea oil, and they've pretty much invested every. To be fair, they did pretty well with how they managed it. They didn't overspend and go binge spending, but apparently they've spread themselves too thin. And now the problem is the Norwegian pension funds, according to everybody, is in serious, serious trouble. So when Norway comes crashing down, it's going to come crashing down absolutely spectacularly. So remember, socialism, like we've seen, in Sweden, socialism was saved. In Norway, socialism did not lead to the wealth. Oil led to the wealth. Socialism was the result of that oil. Okay. Socialism nearly collapsed Sweden. War saved Sweden. Okay. It's still the capitalists keeping Sweden afloat. It's not the socialism keeping Sweden afloat.
Yeah, and for the
Denmark.
record, these countries have one of the lowest corporate tax rates in the world. And the reason these countries are able to do redistributionism, what they call socialism or democratic socialism, is as of now, 80% of their population is still paying income tax.
And at what rates? You're looking at 50% tax rates
50,
almost.
50%, 50.
If you're richer, it goes up to 60-70% sometimes,
It's
which is why
insane,
nobody
man.
wants to live there. It is insane. It is truly insane. And they are so brainwashed that the average mediocre Norwegian or Swede or Dane or Finn that you talk to will tell you, we're very happy paying those taxes. We want to pay taxes. We want this. Except when you talk to a truly exceptional Swede or a Finn or a Norwegian or a Dane who's actually inventing something, it's no longer in Sweden, Finland, Denmark, or wherever. It's outside. Okay,
Hmm.
this continues to be the problem. Uh, Denmark, again, dirt poor. It was an agricultural country, no real future, no real prospects, nothing. It had been completely destroyed in the wars prior. How do you think they became rich?
Which one? I forgot the name. Your voice.
Denmark. Denmark.
Denmark.
How did Denmark?
I have no clue. I am not a history student, man.
Guess. Guess. Just wild guess.
I don't know. It can't be war because I don't remember them being involved in any kind of war.
It's war. It's
They
war.
also
Yeah.
these fuckers,
They,
man. They all these fuckers. All they do is fucking profit off a war. That's all they
yeah.
do.
Yeah. Again, it was profiting off a war. Specifically, you know how? This was again price gouging during war. It was pork sales. They were very
Oh
good at
yeah, the
pork.
pork.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes. Even now, I think it's Denmark's big top 10 exports is one of they're the biggest suppliers of pork to Europe, right? But they really took off and started making their surplus during the war and especially the post-war phase through pork sales. They invested it very smartly. But remember, they took advantage when you're a population at that time of 4 5 million people maximum, reaping bumper sales of pork throughout Europe. It makes you very rich. It makes you very, very rich. It's literally like, I don't know, in Bombay, well, I think Lower Parel would have a bigger population than Denmark. So think of a smaller area. Malabar Hills. Okay, Malabar Hills.
Yeah.
If if
That's the level of population we're looking at.
Yeah, Malabar Hills is the level of population you're looking at. If they sold off the rest of Bombay at market rates today, assume the rest of Bombay was sold off by Malabar Hills, and you distributed it to Malabar Hills, every resident of Malabar Hill would become a billionaire.
Hmm.
Okay, it's like that. It was disproportionate sales of pork that made Denmark rich, and since then they invested pretty damn well. And
Yeah, but
again,
in the
so
case of the Danes, also colonization also must have played a role, right? They were colonizing some places, right?
they didn't have look. None of these four countries, Finland, Denmark, Sweden, Norway, ever. Some of them never colonized. Like Norway never colonized, but none of them ever had big colonies. And when I say big, I mean in terms of population or extraction. Because remember, Greenland, which is several times the size of Denmark, is a Danish colony. It continues to
Mhm.
be a Danish colony even today. Okay, but there was very little that you could actually extract from Denmark, from Greenland. Too cold. The technology for permafrost drilling and things like that, long time. So even now, Greenland is considered a depressed part. The extremely high alcoholism rates, abuse rates, etc., etc.,
Yeah.
etc. out there. So again, problem. So again, Denmark is one of these things which sheer dumb luck. It was war profiteering that led to that profit. And once you make money, you have to be very stupid to lose that money. Okay, extraordinarily stupid to lose that money. So that is Denmark. Finland, dirt poor again. How did they make their money, Kushal?
Or other probabilities. Again, war.
A cold war. Not the war, but a cold war. This time it was a
Yeah,
cold war.
because the Cold War and because they must have profited through that the
Yeah.
whole Russia and whole thing.
Again, very, very small population. And it was something called the Finnish shipping cluster. Okay, so what happened was Finland was ideologically and otherwise aligned to the West, but because of the World War II settlement, where Finland was recognized as having defended itself and not waged a war of aggression, even though the terms were harsh, it was allowed a certain level of political autonomy, which no other country except maybe Austria was given. And so, what happens is the Finns, who had access to Western technology, became the exclusive suppliers of Western level technology to the USSR because they had to be in the USSR sphere of influence, so to say, neutral, but completely subservient to the USSR. And they started up something called the Finnish shipping cluster, which was using their access to Western markets and technology to come up with their own propulsion, to come up with their own ships and sell these to the USSR. Now, again, you're thinking like pork sales. अबे कोई कसाल होके इतना billionaire बन सकता है कि नहीं? Remember, Kapil Sibal's wife runs a butchery, and you know where Kapil Sibal lives and how many hundreds of crores he has. So remember, butchers can make a heck of a lot of money. They can make hundreds of crores of money. If you remember that whole tiff between Barkha Dutt and Kapil Sibal over what was that TV channel that they started called?
I forgot.
Yeah, Tiranga channel. So again, here, ship sales, small population, huge influx of wealth, and the second part of it was actually selling paper. Uh, Lots of pine. They make lots of newsprint and things like that, paper and log and things like that. So they invested smartly, to be fair to them. But again, all of these come with a timeout period. The timeout period is you've become very rich, but innovation ossifies, and all your truly creative population is going elsewhere. So, socialism, remember, these four, you keep claiming that they are the rules that prove the principle. They are actually the exceptions that prove the rule that socialism kills. So, socialism is number three.